Okay, so I'm Chris Cowden. I'm the director of Women in Their Work, and welcome to all. So pleased to have you here at Women in Their Work. And boy, is this going to be a great talk. We have so much talent and accomplishment on this stage that it's blinding, and it's so blinding that it's kind of made us fade. But anyway, this is the darkest we can get it. So let me begin by introducing Emily Little. Emily, she is FAIA. She's provided leadership in the preservation and design community in Humane Boston for 30 years. With an emphasis on the adaptive reuse of historic structures, her work has made a great impact on the fabric of Central Texas. In 1983, she founded Emily Little Architects, which was a predecessor for Clayton Little Architects. She was elected a fellow in the American Institute of Architects in 2009. She's also had award-winning community-based art projects that have garnered national attention. At Clayton Cortez, she now is partner emerita and is focusing on community-oriented and historically significant projects. She served for 6 years on the AIPP, which those in the know, Art in Public Places, panel in the teens. Beili Liu is a visual artist who creates very site-specific and site-responsive installations and performances. Her current research focuses on the complex ecological, political, and environmental concerns of the Arctic, or better known as the Circumpolar North. And she's focused on the urgency of the climate crisis throughout the world. She's exhibited extensively across the world in locations including Norway, Finland, UK, Germany, Italy, Spain, Lithuania, France, with me, Belgium, Poland, Austria, China, Taiwan, and across the U.S. She was born in Jilin, China, and she now lives and works in Austin. And she is the Leslie Waggener Endowed Professor in the College of Fine Arts at UT. Constance White is nationally recognized public art management professional with over 20 years of experience dedicated to the field of arts administration, and she's also a professional visual artist. She's worked with both public and private organizations throughout Texas, DC, Southern California, Alabama, and the Carolinas. She now serves as the manager of the Art in Public Places program for the city of Boston. While she's served as an advisor and a presenter and a panelist for numerous organizations, including the American Association of Airport Executives, Americans for the Arts, the Public Art Coalition of Southern California, Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, and the City of Chicago Department of Cultural Affairs. This is just a short list. So join me in welcoming our really illustrious team. So our plan was to start with a discussion of thirst, which was a public art project that Women in Their Work collaborated to produce in 2013. And Beili will discuss her work, her current projects in the Arctic and the Circumpolar North. And Constance will then talk about the public art places that she's seen that have been really successful, as well as the many opportunities that are right here in front of us here in Austin. Many new projects. So the upside of all of this growth is there's more money for art. So we look forward to hearing that. So the question we posed was, can public art change the world? And we didn't want to let you off the edge of your seat, but the question we believe can be answered with yes. And we'd like to argue that in discussing the impact that public art can have. So I want to lead with a quote from Franz Kafka, who said, "Great art must be the axe that breaks the frozen sea in all of us." So public art, large-scale public art, has the possibility to have great impact because, like an axe, it breaks the frozen sea inside of us. And it's the sense of our ability not to feel, not to see, not to hear, because we're overwhelmed with statistics and people yelling and contrary views, but just seeing something that's very important and powerful in art can move us in a way that nothing else can. So, Thirst was a collaboration in 2013 between Women in the Work, Beili Liu, visual artist, Emily Little and Norma Yancey, who are architects, and Cassie Bergstrom Gowan, who is a landscape architect. So there are many ways for public art to be successful, but for us, the first, second, and third thing that made it successful was collaboration. And flexibility, and being able to be open to serendipity, and maybe the second, third, so I said first, second, third, maybe fourth, fifth, and sixth should be perseverance. But all of these things can make it happen, and it did happen. So collaboration wasn't something that we inherently embraced or knew about, but the Robert Rauschenberg Foundation sent out a call to 80 organizations. They invited 80 art organizations in the country to submit a proposal to the Robert Rauschenberg Foundation, and it was specific for the Artistic Innovation and Collaboration Program, so there was that word, which supports fearless and innovative collaboration in the spirit of Robert Rauschenberg. So it was a $50,000 grant, and they required 3 different fields be represented. In other words, we couldn't just work with 3 different artists. It had to be 3 different fields. So the first thing we did was, what is the spirit of Robert Rauschenberg? And he has a very huge career. And so in looking at his work, which of course everyone knows a lot about him, but he was extremely collaborative, and he also was very interested in the environment. So this was 2013, and the idea that the world was facing a crisis in the environment is not new. It was very prevalent in 2013. And so we would ask people, so we had 8 weeks to submit a proposal to the Rauschenberg Foundation, one of 80. And so we would stop almost people on the street. What is your idea for a project with the environment? And then you'd have to say, I don't know if that'll work, and then go on. So I did that for maybe 15 or 20 people. It was not a good way to approach, but asked Emily Little, and she and Norma Yancey had an idea of, what about we do something about water? We're in this horrible drought. So we approached Beili Liu and said, what do you think about this kind of project? And she said, well, what about water and then trees? Because she had then went and did research. And in 2011, so this was 2013, so 2011, 2012, and 2013 were terrible droughts. 2011 had been the driest year that Texas had ever had in its history, and 300 million trees had died. So that seemed like a good idea. So then we bounced around. We'll see what some of those ideas led to. She also thought of, let's screen print the image of the tree on prayer flags and put them around the hike and bike trail. And Cassie Bergstrom Gowan designed the Pflugerville Bridge and how the flags would work. And there were 14,000 of these flags. So the project involved finding a tree that was dead but not too dead, because it was going to be in the lake for 3 months. Then the one we found was 2.5 tons. Then we were going to spray it white and put it on a pole in the middle of the lake. And then we were going to surround the lake with 14,000 prayer flags. Sounds pretty doable.
For $50,000.
And we had 50,000 was there before us, and it was so enticing. So we presented this to the Robert Rauschenberg Foundation, and they said to 8 organizations, yes, and one of them was Thirst. So we received this. So, but this was the beginning. So getting the approval of the city of Austin and everyone who might object and who did object to this idea. Because many, many people did not want a thing on the trail, they did not want anything on the lake, they were tired of these art things, And what were you doing, and why could you do it? Why do you have the ability or the power? So some of those meetings were exhilarating, some of them were tedious, some of them were exhausting, some of them were awful. There were 52 of them. And what we came to see was that was very much part of the art, was like Christo and Jean-Claude had long known, you have to, especially on complex issues, to bring people into the conversation, to have them be part of it, to engage, to discuss, and to share, as opposed to lecture or give didactic information. And so that was one of the most significant things that we learned. And our enthusiasm is contagious, and there were so many people who helped us. So I need to move this down so everyone can comment. So this was the drawings for where the prayer flags would be, the 2.5 miles. Beili drew this, and it was silk screened on the 14,000 prayer flags. Well, I may have to let somebody else. This is the Pfluger Circle, and you'll see it in real life, but just to see that there was drawings and thinking behind it. Okay. So that's the tree. We can begin our thanking here. So this, we went around the city, and people didn't necessarily want us to cut down a tree in their yard. And we went to the domain they were building, and a lot of the trees were too big. We couldn't really find a public place to take a tree. So Lori and Tito Beveridge offered their ranch in Bastrop, and they let us roam throughout the land and find a tree that was dead enough to cut down. And David Escobedo helped us. He helped us put that hole in the tree, and then it was hauled on a platform truck that was provided by Davy Trees.
Right. I'm just going to step in here. The process was unimaginable, and we really didn't even know what it was going to take. We just knew we wanted to be a tree floating over the lake. And once we found the tree, then we had to figure out how to cut it, push it over. We wanted, and Beili, I love this idea, she wanted the roots to show just above the water. And so simultaneously we're meeting with Jerry Garcia, a structural engineer, like, how in the world are we going to hold it up? And we talked to what's called a pile driver, which is, this is the pile driver right here. And they shot a 6-inch diameter thick-walled steel pipe down into bedrock. And then, could you back up to the tree? Yeah, at this point here, we'd gotten the tree over. When we pushed the tree over, we had these hay bales all set up to cushion the tree. When it fell, perfect. The branches were fine because of the angle. And we all went home happy. I went out the next morning, and the cows had come and eaten all of the hay. And the tree was just sliced down flat. So then we had to like call somebody. We were constantly, the army grew. We started off with like 4 of us sitting around the table, and it just grew. So that day we had to call somebody to come rig up a little electric fence around the tree on the hay bale to keep the cows out, which worked. And then we had the move scheduled. They got it on that flatbed, and then we learned that there was going to be a huge rainstorm. And so the guy said, "Oh, we better do it tonight instead of tomorrow night." So the Davy trees, they were fantastic. They put red circling lights on top of the car.
Not to suggest that they were police cars.
No, not at all. But
because it was midnight, and we were driving down I-35 with a 2.5-ton truck.
With the tree, and then we loaded it. We went to the town lake or Bird Lake, got the tree on the barge, and that was the end of that gang that had gotten us to that point. And then the pile drivers took over, and it floated down the lake. Because we put it in way down east on the river, or the lake, and then it floated down to Pfluger Bridge. And then all this started happening, and this was the most exciting part of all, because we had implanted a 4-inch solid steel rod in the trunk of the tree. And the art here was for them to lift the tree with the shaft and then aim it to the 6-inch diameter pipe waiting for it. And it worked. We put the tree roots first. We had to cut those and then put the shaft on top of that.
So Jerry Garcia was a very well-known and accomplished structural engineer in Austin, but he had to sign off on it as a structural engineer to meet the demands of the city for safety, because here we have a 2.5-ton tree in the middle of the lake where people are kayaking and canoeing and trying to jump off the tree, I might add. And so he did measurements, he did the physics, he looked, and he stamped, but frankly, he had never worked with a 2.5-ton dead tree in the middle of the lake, but there were people that were willing to say, I'm going to do this, I'm really interested in this is something I want to pursue, and Baby Trees was the same way. They devoted so much time and energy. So that was something. And also, Connie Arizmendi and Laura Garensway designed the lighting, which was remarkable. So here, this was how the 14,000 flags were put together. One by one by one by one in our office. So we just had stacks and stacks and stacks of them. So in a way it was Zen-like, in some ways it was not. So this is the opening day when we announced the revealing of the tree. You can see the flags. And we didn't know about crowd control or how many people would come or who would be there. So it was really a little questionable, but it was a great moment. It all worked. So this is in the day. That's the Fluger Circle. So it went around the whole hike and bike trail. Then we had flood. We were in a terrible drought, but then we had flood, and we put it to the Buddhist prayer flags. We thought, yeah. I know, we had a lot of them. So this was another thing with education. So we were talking to people the whole time about water and water conservation and all of these conversations. And this was something that was really fascinating to learn. A flood in Austin didn't help our watershed. It needed to rain up above so it would come down the river. So this was great for people that were below us, but still, this was what happened. And then here, it became so popular, someone went as the tree for Halloween. And then all the kids, we had a lot of education classes out there, and it was really wonderful to have them engaged with it and also to hear them talk about water and, like on Sesame Street, don't brush your teeth, turn off the water. There were a lot of talks. So anyway, it was a hugely successful project, but again, intuitive, inductive, collaborative. So we'll jump in.
I'll jump in.
Yes.
There were so many amazing stories during the entire process of working on this. And one of the things I remember was that we met with the city arborist, and he was very helpful and very knowledgeable. He was trying to push an invasive tree to us. As if we can take this out, we'll take care of an issue on city property, you can have this tree. And we had to stand our ground and say, it's beautiful, it's the right size, but it's just not right for the concept. We needed a tree that's well loved. So what we used in Thirst is a cedar elm that's very common here. The form is very familiar. It's this backyard tree that we all know, and it's something people can connect to. So I think that was important. So that was a really interesting minor moment, even when people are helping. We're still trying to balance and navigate.
We also had great help. Sue Edwards was the assistant city manager, and Laura Esparza was great help to this project. And just as a closing on this, all of us had full-time jobs during this period. It started in November of 2012 and ended we put it up in September of 2013. Beili was pregnant. Cassie was getting married in September. But it happened. So I think just the idea of collaboration, working together, having people explain the ideas to people, and they joined and helped us and made it happen.
One other thing I'd love to share was this collaborative process. Before Thirst, I really hadn't collaborated with many other artists or creative individuals. So when Chris invited me to join this project, I was wondering how that process would work. When I brought the tree idea to the team, this is at a very early stage. I remember I came and I said, I learned about millions of trees died. This is heartbreaking. It will be amazing to put a tree in the center of the Lake because that's a place we love as well. And I said, I know it's not doable. This is a crazy idea. I just want to share it for fun. And I said, it will be easier if we do a bunch of little trees, maybe make a small forest somewhere, or if it's possible, maybe we can put it on the beach. And I remember Emily said, no, hang on. Let's talk about the tree in the water. And I want to say, as an artist, an idea comes, then it goes. I believe this project would never have happened if it wasn't a collaborative team. It would just be one of those crazy thoughts that would just go away. So collaboration enable the impossible possible.
I like that. That's a nice one.
Another aspect of this is that it was essentially privately funded. It is art in the public realm, but it was privately funded. And Constance is going to give you the nuts and bolts of what publicly funded art is. But our path was easier in many ways because we were not diluted by the bureaucracy of public funding. We were not diluted by committee decision making. And it absolutely would not have happened.
There were many innocent who helped us.
Many, yeah. But having that lightning bolt from above of the assistant city manager, the 52 meetings of explaining what we were doing, and I deeply believe that all of the concept of this project touched everyone deeply. And whether they can, it's hard to draw a straight line between an emotional or disastrous concept of a current political or environmental issue. Can't draw a straight line to the art. But this piece spoke so deeply to all of us that you could see the doubters' opinion changed in the conversation when we talked about these statistics. But it absolutely took Beili's amazing artistic vision that never wavered, and our leader, Chris Cowden, she is generous with praise of others, but this project ran so far over budget. And I would just call and say, okay, electric fence, okay, this, that, and she's, okay, be right on it. And she was constantly, I think she raised money for 2 straight years, or your whole life, I know. But it just really, there was an agility to the freedom to the private funding aspect of this project that I think made something so astounding possible.
So to follow up on that amazing, beautiful statement, I want to say that public art does change the world. They change the world by touching people. I think art in general, art has the ability to make change happen. Could I go to the next slide? And I want to say in preparation of this panel, I geeked out. I went to my archive of video footage. This is 10 years later, and I have never had the time to edit these footages into a film. So this is the first time anyone has seen this other than myself. I've just put together a 1-minute process at the very final stage of how the piece is coming down the river, and our heart was pounding. It was so beautiful, and we were so excited. I took all
very
those films along the way. Or on the bridge talking and screaming and being so happy. And I think it's such a treat to show you that happened. And you see how fragile that tree is. And my partner was there, he was like, this tree is on the last leg. And I believe, you see some branches where it has fallen on the side. I believe at the very end we'll have to climb up and attach one piece. Yeah. I said, the form just doesn't look good anymore. I really want to branch go to the right. And an arborist
Got it.
climbed the tree and attached that one branch, and then yours was right.
Wow.
It's a project. So, what do we learn from a project? I call Thirst a project of a lifetime, and I had thought, when we're in our old age, sitting by, together with a cup of tea, this will be the project we talk about. And I want to point to the prayer flag tradition. In a sense, it's this goodwill, it's this hope for the better. Borrowing the Tibetan prayer flag practice. How do I, it's not, can see? Oh, here we go. Women Their Work had some excess flag that we didn't use in the installation and had carefully stored it for all this time until 2020. When the pandemic came and Chris called me at some point and said, do you want the extra flags? You can probably make something as an artist, maybe you think of a new idea. Actually, you gave me a few years before, and I stored it knowing something might come. So when the pandemic came, the Thirst flag came to my mind, and I thought, this is what I can do, where we're all lost in this chaos, in the sense of tremendous loss, fear, anxiety. It brought such comfort to me as a person and as an artist. All the shows were canceled, now we're just sewing flags. I know many community members did this. So in this way, Thirst was continuing to give. And it reminded me that when we face challenges and dire threats, both in terms of the environment and our social situations, the best thing we can do perhaps is something small but persistent. I make use of sewing and women's work in my project often. Some of you might have seen this piece before. It's called the Mending Project. It is also supported and enabled by Women Their Work. This was 2 years before Thirst in the old location of Women Their Work Gallery. So when we gather our intention, our desire to heal and to mend together, when we collectively do something small and persistent, positive change perhaps could happen. So, it's going the wrong direction. Sorry, could I go back to the first, okay, this slide, okay. I do believe that I learned so much from Thirst in terms of the collaborative process of what a team can enable, and as an artist, Thirst also expanded my practice. What I realized the most thinking about Thirst is that it's a project that's about giving back to the community. It's not about the artist, it's not about the show or the record, it's about this intention that inspired conversations about the topic that's so important to all of us. And with that in mind, I thought I would love to push towards this direction, to make work that's meaningful for my community, that's perhaps stepping away from the traditional practice. During the pandemic, we all did some soul searching. With all the projects canceled, I wondered what I could do as an artist. This is keeps skipping. Could I come to the computer? Because I'm losing track of the slides. The clicking is going somewhere.
Do you want to prompt me? Sorry, I can just.
I think that's a little awkward. Let me comment, if that's all right. That's good. Sorry. I'm used to running the slides. Thank you. You can see me. I'm here. So I decided to go to the Arctic because the Arctic is a place that climate change is happening the fastest. The Arctic is warming about 4 times faster than the rest of the world. So what happens there impacts all of us. In 2022, I went to Tromsø, Norway as a Fulbright Arctic chair. I'm really grateful for the support. And the first thing I did was to take Thirst flag to the forest of Tromsø. what really moved me was the trees there in the Arctic, subarctic environment look so similar to our trees here in Texas. In this way, this desire to protect our fragile environment is shared. The North and the South were not that far apart because we're interconnected. So I created a number of projects while in Tromsø, and one of which is called Arctic Mending. I'm bringing this essence and this desire to heal through the symbolic gesture of sewing into the Arctic landscape. In a way, I'm offering this prayer, but also I'm connecting with the landscape. So I performed in 5 different locations in different parts of high North Norway, and the piece then was later exhibited as a 2-channel video at Hallgammon Prescott. It's a gallery in southern Norway this June. And that piece of paper I was sewing is mulberry paper. I chose it for several reasons. One is that it echoes with the landscape. It's both very strong. Mulberry paper is very tough, but it's still really fragile. As it lays on the snow, because I'm sitting with it, it's melting the snow, so over time it's becoming worn, softened, and torn. So when I travel with it, I just stuff it in my backpack. So it wasn't treated very preciously, just like how perhaps the actions were imposing onto our landscape. In the same exhibition, you can see the mulberry paper was displayed on the left, and on the right-hand side is another installation that's titled Breathing Water. Over the past number of years, as long as I could recall, anytime I go to a seashore, I would pick up plastic debris, and they are all so similar. We share this burden. The plastic in our ocean is a big problem, and they come from us into the rivers, then into the water. And it comes from the Gulf of Mexico and goes all the way to the Arctic Ocean. So our plastic trash can travel all the way to the Arctic. It's a very simple translation and contemplation of our time. You know, if there's a signature of a lifetime, our lifetime signature perhaps is the plastic. So the intention is not, I don't know as an artist how to solve these problems, just like thirst. We're putting the image out there. Perhaps the image could inspire, could move people to do something about it. Another project is a line drawing the snow. This is a performance still. I took a band of red silk to the Arctic. I knew I wanted to draw this temporal line. The body leans into the wind. It becomes a sail, and the line becomes a brush stroke. It's a collaboration with the Arctic wind. It's my way of connecting with this extremely pristine, beautiful, powerful, and fragile landscape. It's also my way to be able to bring it back, to share with people and with all of you who live here in my home city. That line that's drawing the snow, I see as the symbolic division between the Arctic and the rest of the world. Arctic seems so abstract and distant, but that line perhaps is disappearing. As to if we go forward or back, it's up to all of us. So the piece was displayed in a composition, as you can see in the gallery space. As people walk around, the installation is almost like animated sequence I just showed you, but in space. So they're going from one panel to another. They're traveling on the inside, then on the outside of the piece. So I'm jumping ahead to this fall. I went back to the Arctic. In between, I went to Alaska, I went to Arctic Canada. I've done a lot of research, and I fell in love with glaciers. To think about glaciers here in Texas is such an abstract thing, but I want to refer to it as, think about our rivers and lakes. They're fed, most of them, many of them are fed by glacier water. Glaciers are melting all over the world. When they're gone, what happens to our rivers and lakes? So I was on the Arctic Circle Artist Residency Expedition. We were on board of the Antigua ship, and we sailed around the Svalbard archipelago, which is the northernmost inhabited city archipelago. It was this amazingly beautiful place, and it's impossible to think that this is dying. The glaciers are dying, they're disappearing, even though in the Arctic it's such a cold place. I took the silk there as well. Somehow, I see this as a song. It's silent, but it's this dance, this song, is offering to the Arctic, to the glacier. So this project has never been shown before, of course, and I don't know what the final state, final form will take. It's called a line drum for the glacier. I'm thinking about greetings and goodbyes at the same time, because most likely this is the first time that I see the glacier. It will also be the last. And jumping ahead to, I just came back from Iceland. I came back from Svalbard for 3 weeks, and I went back to Iceland for a residency. I'm grateful that this time I could bring my daughter and my partner with me. It's a short residency. So Cyan was in me when Thirst was made, and she was born right before Thirst came down, so she was the first baby. She's now 10. When she can't travel with me and when she can't come in my studio, sometimes she helps me to make work. We created a large cyanotype print using silk organza, and with this contemplation of what happens to our water, to our glaciers, we took it to the river, and the river is fed by glacier water. 10% of Iceland is covered by glaciers, so there's such a generosity and abundance of water, and of course hot springs as well. We put it in the icy water. And we're drawing this line. To me, it's almost like a mourning for the loss of our glaciers. I'm gonna take this. A friend of mine mentioned, they said if the spirit of the glacier is melting, if they stayed together and went down the river, perhaps it will look like this. So I have no idea what this will become. And I want to say, obviously, what I've shown you so far, they're not public artworks, but I think about thirst. I think about what I learned, the sense of giving back, talking about things that matter to us. It moved me as an artist, and it shaped all the future work I do. In that way, it is meaningful that our work as artists, as creatives, as art administrators, we're moving one person at a time, one project at a time, so art can change the world. So I want to just mention, I walked on this glacier right before I came back to Austin. It's the first one I walked on. It is amazing, but you can see it's soft, it's wet, it's like losing its masses. We parked probably 2 kilometers away, and they said once the glacier was there, probably a couple decades ago, and now it's way deep into the valley. And it felt soft and alive, and there's so much sadness. And I say, go see a glacier before they're gone. We have between 150 to 200 years. And then what happens to our water? So that's the question I want to leave. Thank you.
Stand over here because I can see over here, so hopefully you will focus on the screen and not on me. And you'll just have to let me know if you can't hear me. This is the. Did you say can I speak louder?
Yeah.
Oh, I was just about to say, let me know if you can't hear me because this is the bandwidth of my voice. If I speak any louder, it's either going to crack or the windows will crack because it starts to sound like a shriek. But I will do the best that I can without eating the microphone. So again, just to reintroduce myself, my name is Constance White. I've been a career public art professional for almost 30 years. I started when I was 1. I'm happy to be here today. I've actually been in Austin for exactly a year and a half. And so thank you, Chris, for posing this question, can public art change the world? And thank you, Beili, for the poem, for the song, for the spirit of that presentation. It is working with artists like you that change me and challenge me as a public art administrator to challenge the public, to extend that vocation to the public sphere and ask them to extend our thought on the value of our investment. So thank you for that. We can go to the next slide. Can you click for me? Oh, there you go. Oh, so change. I'm also majored in English with art history, so I like to look up words and they're important to me. Communication is very important, not only verbally, but also visually. And so change is both a noun and a verb. You can be changed, you can change. And I just want us to think about that as we review these last few slides. So how? Oh, we can't see this. The question is right here. But that's okay. How can public art change the world? It punctuates places within the built environments. And just looking at some places that many of us have either seen or that we've been to, oftentimes when I was just having dinner with friends last night, before I started working on this presentation, and they were like, how did the bean happen? And I said, well, the bean, Cloudgate, is not in isolation. The bean is part of a multiplex, a very complicated redevelopment that includes art and architecture. And if you're just standing in front of one thing, maybe you don't notice everything else, but it is the artwork that punctuates and becomes the attraction to this entire redevelopment that revitalized Chicago. And you can see over here, several studies estimate that the park has increased by over $1 billion to the residential value of downtown, and that 1.2 billion almost each year. People are coming to see the art. So can art change the world? Maybe. Let's go to the next one. So this project is very subtle. It just looks like a park. It's been redeveloped downtown Charlotte. I worked on this project. The artist, as a part of the design team, the lead artist Nori Sato, is based in Seattle, Washington. She advised and influenced the landscape architect to look at Romar Bearden's artwork. Romar Bearden is a Harlem Renaissance artist, and his work was influenced by Black genre during the time. And so it's separated into rooms, but on the foot level, there's a palette and a pavement and a movement of the landscape that is really inspired by the artist's work. He's a collage artist. But one would never do that. And this park would look very different if the artist didn't influence the design of it. And there is one public art piece that's there. It's about 35 feet tall by an artist who just passed, Richard Hunt. He's a Chicago-based artist. And it was very apropos for that work to be there. So we can go to the next project. So another how, it elevates awareness, and Beili did such a beautiful job of helping us see some things that we would never see. So thank you again for that. We can go to the next slide. This installation was created by some friends of mine, Mads and Leosh Hader. And there are these plexiglass umbrellas in Shishi, China, that bring attention to water, again, the preciousness of water, our engagement with water, and what lands in and around these umbrellas during this was a temporary installation. There are 7 total altogether, and they're really beautiful and very poetic in a little bit of a remote area. We can go to the next one. This project is actually a project that I worked on in Dallas. It was commissioned by Southern Methodist University as a temporary installation, part of, I think, 7 other projects for an initiative called New Cities, Future Ruin. And the artist that curated all of these ideas was really thinking about the development and redevelopment of the Sun Belt region. Part of that we reside in. and how developers are allowed to discard, disrespect, or sometimes take our natural resources into consideration, such as land, but how we often fight about that. So this was imagined as a water storage collector filtration system. The artist is Brooklyn-based and never came to the site, but rose to the tour of the commission and sent the plans in advance. We can go to the next slide. And so all of these various materials with the paracord, the wood, and there are some stackable water storage materials. The paracord actually collects dew. So if you're in an arid environment and water scarcity is an issue, then this could be a prototypical way of imagining how you can pop up a structure and create some simple filtration and allow water to be available for people. We can go to the next slide. So he sent these instructions, and there are more, and we commissioned a local artist to actually construct this. We can go to the next one. And it ended up turning into a game. The kids really loved it because there wasn't a playground that was nearby, but adults would get in it too, and you would create your boundaries with the yellow kind of wood markers and negotiate your development with whoever was in the sandbox with you. And you could come to an amicable negotiation or not. There were no winners to the game because this is kind of a game that mimics real life, right? And so this installation lasted for about 3 weeks. We can go to the next one. This is an installation in Europe. It's a temporary installation, and the artists are mimicking classical architecture, while also bringing attention to like the changing environment in these 3 European cities of Geneva, Madrid, and London. And as the weather changes and as the seasons change, the artists have tapped into a system that monitors the change and provokes some attention to the change by changing this installation. So another how provokes curiosity, reflection, and wonderment. Isn't this fun? I just like to show this because sometimes we need to have fun with public art. Sometimes we take ourselves too seriously. I'm one of those people. I'm very serious. And I just put this here because, you know, it's a temporary installation, but sometimes we don't want to make an investment in temporary installations because in the public sphere, we want things to live a lifetime. And oftentimes when I'm talking to my colleagues or you know, my superiors who say, well, it should last for 20 years or 50 years, sometimes our other infrastructure doesn't last that long. And we also have to think about how we maintain these things. We maintain our bodies, we maintain our cars, we maintain our public buildings and bridges. We also have to think about the maintenance and care of public art. And so sometimes thinking about that, we should interject some humor in the public space. We can go to the next one. Reflection. Again, sometimes, you know, the seriousness of the work that we invest in, we want to inspire artists to be reflective and give space and patronage for that to happen. And Beili has definitely shared a good cause for us to think about funding those types of opportunities and having spaces for the unexpected to happen. This place is in a forest in England, and again was a part of a temporary installation. Can you all hear me okay? I'm trying really hard. Yeah. Okay, we can go to the next one. And in the Ukraine, again, like this is a permanent installation, but to as a more metaphor of bringing light to areas that are dark. This company works internationally with this aggregate that can be included or part of the matrix of concrete. Forgive me if I go into my contractor language here. But you can see like the path can be seen during the day and at night because there's a glowing aggregate that acts as a solar collector. But you know, brings some magic to this forested area. We can go to the next. This is a project that I worked on for San Diego International Airport. It's a 2-3-part installation with architectural materials and projection. The artists were inspired by the bioluminescence that happened in the bay just across the highway from the airport, as well as the giant kelp forest that happens like in an adjacent neighborhood, if you can call the ocean a neighborhood. So Point Loma actually has the largest giant kelp forest in the world, and ingredients that are harvested from kelp are in toothpaste and ice cream and in other things. We can go to the next one. And so bringing attention to the giant kelp forest, which is right there, but also the bioluminescence that's projected from the projectors that are there, elevates awareness of the bay that we're flying over and where we're landing. Another interesting thing to note is that the artists collaborated with NOAA, our weather people, the North Oceanic Atmospheric Association, to attach an apparatus to a buoy that monitors the weather, that gives a gentle movement and flow to the projection and also changes the projection based on the movement of the bay just across the highway. We can go to the next. Here's this is about a quarter of a mile. These are just architectural panels that are cut into the shapes of the kelp. And it's either Dibond or Alucobond, an aluminum composite material. So artists do collaborate a lot with architects and engineers and landscape architects to enable large-scale projects and also to use those durable materials. But we chose to put these here instead of the big kind of recessed lights that sometimes are blinding underneath these roadways. And this actually provides like a gentle reflection for our passengers and those who are dropping folks off at the airport. We can go to the next one. So marking moments in time is another thing. And so when we think about the Vietnam Memorial, and Chris and I actually talked about this, Maya Lin was a graduate student that competed for this. She'd been doing research on monuments and memorials and had written a paper and decided that she would compete on a whim. And she may have been 19 or 20 years old and won this competition. And at the time, it was widely protested against in the art world, and other administrators just did not think that it was a valid idea. But the artist intentionally made this connection to the other monuments in the park, working with the landscape architect, but also the monumentality and the importance of how do you bring resolve to so many people who have been lost. But listing their names, and then by finding your loved one's name and seeing your reflection as you're looking at that loved one's name gives you that connection. It's such a simple concept, but the monumentality of it is really timeless. Another piece that marks a moment in time, this actually was recently completed here in Austin. It marks the 2013 Onion Creek flood and was created by a local artist, Alonso Esparza, along with a team of folks here, the Camino students from the MAT, I have so many MAT acronyms in my brain, but the Mexican American Cultural Center that's here. It was very much a collaborative process and project. The artists spending months interviewing people who have been impacted by the flood, who really had not brought resolve to the healing and mourning that we often experience when something really tragic happens. And so this is installed now, and it's right here for us to enjoy and to just appreciate what has happened, and the city has vowed to not ever allow to happen again. We can go to the next one. This is an aerial view that looks really abstract, but you can see it's painted on the asphalt. You can see the artist used a grid system to lay everything out, and these are just some barriers around it. But the scale is quite impressive, and again, it was a collaborative opportunity. We can go to the next one. And this was a dedication ceremony where the community was allowed to share space, share stories, and to be in community to heal with this really beautiful piece that was recently installed. We can go to the next one. So just building community in general, and this will be one of the last projects that I talked about. Project Row Houses in Houston is turning 30 years old this year. Are you all familiar with Project Row Houses? This is great, lots of head nods. Project Row Houses is more than just artist galleries or a public art experiment. They have social practice, social work, wraparound services for mothers, and now they have housing as well. And so it's really grown from a disinvested or underinvested community to a community asset that the world looks at. How did you do this? And it is about placemaking, but not about placemaking in that textile. Is anyone from textile? Don't tell them I said this and edit this out of the video. It's not about them just marking a spot like X marks the spot for art, or building a retaining wall and says, this will be a great canvas for your art. But it really is about, like, how are you being conscientious and intentional about bringing the arts into a space that impact and expand community, that continue to allow community to evolve and change, to invite community into a space where they own and not just left for them to do something with. We can go to the next one. Again, so many different people gather for Project Row Houses, not only during the events, but it's just an active community space as well. We can go to the next one. And this is just some of the housing that people use, indoor and outdoor spaces. They're always active, and it's just a beautiful example of how we like to define placemaking and bringing arts and community together. So change. Over the next 10 years in Austin, this is what we have to think about. The convention center. The convention center we will have a new convention center, and they will be imploding within the next year. And so many of you may or may not know, the city of Austin, like many other cities in the country, whether you agree with the new convention center or not, the city of Austin has a 2% for arts allocation, which means 2% of construction costs after they subtract funds for equipment and electrical, anything below grade, water pipes and things like that. The rest of the construction budget, 2% is applied and goes into a public art fund. And so for a $2 billion facility, there's a significant amount of investment for art in public places and public art that hasn't been imagined yet. How about that? So we can go to the next one. The airports, also happening right now. A new terminal is being designed. Our airport is underperforming, under capacity. They're breaking capacity records every day. 50,000 people flying through Austin Bergstrom International Airport on a daily basis. Can we imagine that? That's a lot of people in one place kind of coming and going. Looking at the mid-concourse terminal that will be designed and built over the next 8 years, maybe sooner, because technology allows us to build things sooner. They're looking at an $8 billion investment for infrastructure. And after we subtract maybe federal grants and some other costs, that's a pretty hefty double-digit $1 million budget for public art that has not been imagined yet. We can go to the next one. Our Future 35, Austin's Cap and Stitch program. Have you all heard of this? Oh, I'm not managing anything. But I felt that. I've been on several calls with TxDOT and with city engineers, and we're having more calls that are coming up talking about these massive infrastructure projects that are about to happen. And I can push back just a little bit. And so we want them to be mindful of our public spaces and not to leave spaces for us, but to invite us to imagine what those spaces could be. And so we're having those conversations right now, but we haven't resolved anything yet, or the budgets. But it's happening right now. And so we can go to the next slide. This is one of those renderings that was created by an engineer, and they have wanting to encourage them to, again, to not leave those spaces, but to include us in imagining how those spaces present themselves with the public and to the public. That's the next one. So can public art change the world? Yes, but let's start with Austin. Thank you.